This is CheloniaCast, episode 76. Today we are joined by Michela Coury, who's a freshwater turtle biologist with Mass Wildlife, where she is tasked with protecting and researching the turtles in Massachusetts. Michela did her master's thesis on spotted turtles and spotted turtle ecology and movement. She's also worked with box turtles and many other species in Massachusetts and elsewhere that we're really excited to talk about today. She's also the co host of the Field Stories podcast, another great program focused on adventures in the field and stories from really getting down and dirty in putting the work in. So we'll link that in the description, and we're really excited to talk to her today. So thanks for joining us, Michela.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk about turtles and actually have a platform just to talk about turtles. So I feel like on my podcast, I just, bring too many people who are turtle centric. And then my co hosts are like, okay, that's enough. No more turtles. So
There's no such thing as too many turtles,
that's what I say. I tell
especially
them
not
every
here.
time. I'm like, I'm just slowly turning this into a turtle podcast. Sorry, y'all. So
But yeah, I guess on the topic of turtles, like when did your interest in them really begin? And what was your interest in wildlife and conservation in general? Like when did that start?
yeah, that's a great question. Thanks. So I actually like okay, this is terrible, especially as a turtle biologist, but I was really afraid of turtles growing up. Especially snapping turtles. I know, it's terrible,
Crazy.
but I was always like really integrated to nature. I'd always if I came home, I'd be out in the forest. I would be fishing my pond. I was really actually interested in fisheries and their dynamics and terms of that field. So I actually had started my undergrad and my field journey into fisheries in marine and freshwater. And, I feel like I wasn't sure if I wanted to be exactly a marine biologist, but I just love being in the water. And so, undergrad happened and I went through a myriad of jobs from being an aquarist to helping out with the DNR. And then I decided I wanted to get my master's. And so I always knew I wanted to be like an ecologist. I really like animal behavior. I was a person who liked everything. Like if you gave me something, I'd be like, I want to learn about it. Tell me. And then I got into my master's with intentions of going to fisheries. And then the advisor and I that I had started with, we just didn't find a good topic that we could both collaborate on. So I ended up going to another professor and I was like, hey, you know what? This is not working out. What could I do? And she said, well, I have a project on spotted turtles. And so I was like, what are those? So I know this is like calling myself out, right? But I was from the east side. We didn't have like that many. We didn't really have a lot of turtles. And like my family is not, they love animals. They're not very, what do I say, animal educated or knowledgeable. And so, if we had a garter snake in our backyard, it would be immediately like, kill it, or that's poisonous. And so I didn't have a very, upbringing that was like really encouraging for science. I mean, they supported it. They just didn't know. And so I decided to take this spotted turtle journey and I learned so much. And then I just like fell in love with them. And then thanks to my advisor, honestly, she really helped me learn a lot more about herpetofauna and to not be afraid. I lost my fear of snapping turtles, but just to really, especially learning about their physiology and their anatomy, it helps you understand the animal so much more and help, curb those fears, especially for gators or any type of venomous snake. Like I had a lot of Massasaugas in my field site. So I ended up just developing this love, especially you spend all this time with this one animal for your thesis. How can you not? Like either you end up hating it or you end up loving it. And then I just fell in love with turtles because I was like, wow, this is really an underdog of the animal kingdom that a lot of people just don't focus on. And I want to be an advocate for them. And so, yeah, and then I just started just really like expanding my experience in turtles to be a voice, but also just I wanted to learn as much as I could. But yeah, that's how I started out. Sorry, I know I wasn't a huge turtle lover in the beginning, but
I guess
That's
that
all.
still kind of counts as the beginning, though, looking at it from a career point of view.
Mhm.
Like, not everybody starts, I guess, but yeah, having like a supportive family and everything made a huge difference for me, at least when I was
Mhm.
younger. But it was like I was always the kid out there catching animals in the creeks and all of that, and it narrowed down more with time, and then I grew more of an interest in like science and research over time. So
Mhm. That's awesome.
yeah,
It seems like some people do take. I mean, I'm in the ecology school at UGA, and it does seem like there's kind of two major routes. There's the one that Jack and I took, where it's like we were
yeah,
really just willing to get dirty all the time for it. And then some people are like, it was a fear growing up or something they had no
yeah.
interest in, and then it kind of shifted, and now they love it. So it's
Mhm.
interesting that that was more, the turtles are foreign, and then taking on the project, you learn a lot about them.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was always an animal lover. I was, the same as you guys. I was like out in the woods, looking for animals. I just didn't have a background, like I said, that was very knowledgeable. And so my family's all medical. So like that's kind of what I
Mhm.
grew up with. And finally getting into this field, they're learning now. So I can teach them about snakes and how they're not, poisonous, but they're rather venomous. And we only have one venomous snake in Michigan where I'm from, and you're never going to see it, and how the benefits of these animals. And so now my dad calls me, he's like, I saw a snapping turtle on the golf course, and my dad's a golfer, that's a whole other thing, but or he's like, I think I saw a blamings turtle, and so he's like learning. And this is a man who just really didn't care about any of this stuff. And so being able to dive into this and then bring that back to my family, who now is very knowledgeable, is really exciting for me too.
Yeah,
That's all.
that's gotta be awesome. I've had a similar experience with a lot of my family and extended family members. They're always excited to send me pictures, like, "Oh, I saw you online," or "I saw a snapping turtle, I thought of you," or something like that. And my dad is now, like, super into turtles, like,
That's
he's always
awesome.
following everything that I do, and yeah, it's very awesome to have a supportive family.
Yeah, no, my family's super supportive too. Do not get me wrong. Just because they just didn't know about animals, like
Yeah,
they
yeah.
are the ones encouraging me to continue on, especially like now too. So I'm very grateful.
That's awesome. With regard to your thesis, I mean, that's always, and for us now at the getting to the end of undergrad or wherever we're at, I mean, we're starting to think about master's projects, PhD, that sort of thing. Uh,
Mhm.
I'm just curious, the evolution of a project like that, because that's multiple years of work. What was it like going out to your field site or starting the project versus at the end? I mean, what were the major things that you took away from it? And then maybe we could dive into some of those specifics, but what was that evolution like?
Yeah, I love that question, and I'm really glad that you guys are really intrigued about the next steps in terms of education too. But actually, it's really interesting is my project started off completely different than how it ended up. So my initial project was really based off of mesopredation and looking at raccoons preying upon turtles, and um, looking at like how dense the raccoon population and how much that affected these populations of threatened species. And then I think what happened is that we just could not, especially for a master's thesis, like we just didn't have enough time or manpower to kind of conduct this thesis. So we decided to reroute. And looking at the literature, looking at past literature, we ended up finding out that there was a professor from Alma University that had studied this population 20 years ago and did home range studies and movement. And so we decided, why don't we trap, see if we can find some of the same turtles and conduct a similar study to compare after the past, the next 20 years. Along with that, there's really not much information about spotted turtles in Michigan. So really any information is beneficial. So as we continued on and I learned a lot more about research in general, about home ranges and how to conduct research, my project continued to develop. And it was, we went from collecting demographics to and morphometrics to looking and at their home ranges, to their movement, to looking at habitat selection, and just getting all of those variables in. Because when you're in the field, there's never like too much information you can collect because you can use it all. And looking back, I kind of actually wish I did more, but it's hindsight, of course. And so yeah, I think that is kind of how it really transformed. And I think the best advice I would give to someone who's starting out, I was talking to a colleague about this the other day, is that, you know, science is so unpredictable and we have to be ready for something completely to change. I mean, you could be halfway through your project and something stops working and then you're like, "Oh wow, I have to completely redo this." And then you feel kind of like a failure, but you're not. It's a part of science. And so that's kind of what happened. I mean, I started grad school with an intention to do fish behavior. That didn't work out. Then I did spotted turtles thinking I'm doing it with raccoons. And that's only, you know, I have a committee member going, "This is not feasible," going, "What am I doing now?" And so then, you know, I just ended up where I was there. And I think I did so much research on my own too, that that really made it into my own, you know, and like my advisor gave me the space to do that. You know, she was not micromanaging me. She was like free reins, and that was awesome.
That's really interesting, and like, Jack and I have both done research projects, but nothing as detailed as masters, and so it's like looking through studies like yours is helpful to see, you know, what goes into a project like that, and it's a lot of detail. I mean, you it seem like we're trying to get at the spatial ecology of the turtles with a conservation angle, but you just get at that from so many different angles that it's real interesting.
Mhm.
And then so, maybe we could talk about the home range, and that was kind of one of the core things that you looked at, and it seemed like the one thing just through going through that you noticed the home ranges in your study population were a bit different than other populations, and I'm curious, you know, what was that? What was driving that?
Yeah. You know, I've, you know, especially now being very well versed in spotted turtle ecology and spatial ecology, looking back at it, I still agree with I think what I had written on my thesis manuscript, which I'm not very proud that that's out there. I'm hoping to revise and have a better publication, but you know, I was like, "Oh, you guys read that? No, don't do it." But you know, I'm very proud of the work. But anyways, you know, what I think so, normally across literature, you know, home range can be very variable, and but it tends to lean with females having larger home ranges than males. But I found that the males had a larger home range. The population that I was studying in Michigan was a very healthy and large population, but it was like many spotted turtle population was very isolated. But I think what made this very distinguished was that they had all the resources within a very close vicinity. They had a vernal pool within, depending where you were, you know, 30 to 100 meters away. You know, they had this beautiful prairie, wet prairie fen that they were able to traverse in without too much mesopredation, without barely any human traffic, and had enough water and just carry on and other resources that they didn't have to travel that far. I think also is that when we see a lot of females having a larger home range, is most likely due to nesting. And so they have to traverse very far to go and nest somewhere. So when we're looking at areas where spotted turtles have larger home ranges, is more than likely that their nesting areas are either fragmented or really far away from their normal activity area during the activity season. And so what I found is that, you know, because this is such an isolated area, they are congregating mostly all of them at this one specific, just like pristine vernal pool. They don't have to go far to mate. But you know, the males, because of that, I think had a larger home range because they're looking for mates. But the females, they just go from the vernal pool right into the prairie fen. That's where they nest. That's where they nest, and that's where they overwinter. Which in other parts of the country, we're finding, you know, that maybe they're not nesting in the wetlands, so that's adding on to their home range, or nesting in more upland forest areas. And not only are the, you know, males, you know, traveling far, but the females are traveling far to nest, to overwinter, to forage. Where in this field site specifically is that we just didn't have that. You know, they had all the resources in a really close vicinity. So males traveling more, you know, they're a little bit more active in like the cooler season. And so, and then they're just searching for mates. And the females, they don't have to move far to nest. So it kind of made sense to me. I think also based on the quality of the habitat of why, you know, we saw those specific home ranges.
That's really interesting. Jack, how did because you've got spotted turtles and you have experience with them. I still
Limited, limited experience. Let me say that. Yeah.
I'm curious how your population though kind of what's your experience? It would be interesting if you guys kind of compared that, because you're working in very different areas,
Mhm.
habitat wise and movement wise. I mean, that would be interesting to know.
Yeah, at least from the like, I have very limited experience just from like it's all peripherally related to my mud turtle research that I do. But the spotted turtle populations that I've seen, and I've seen two of them in Delaware. One is right on the coast, about 100 yards from the ocean. It's like nestled
Mhm.
in the dunes. And there's just this series of tiny vernal pools, and at least according to the state, because they study them, that those turtles aren't moving much at all there. They're literally trapped in like a series of 3 or 4 pools. And then in the northern end of the state, you've got a bit of like a wider ranging area that they live in, maybe coexist with bog turtles in some places. But yeah, overall, it seems to be pretty different from yours. And sadly, they're not as good looking as your turtles. So,
Yeah, I know. I think
but
that's another reason I was like, "Oh, the habitat quality is good," because of these turtles, their spots are bright, their shell or their carapaces are smoothed out, and there were so many long-lived, individuals out there too. But yeah, I agree with you, Jack. Moving to the Northeast, I have also seen more maybe decrepit looking spotted turtles, but also
yes,
yeah,
decrepit.
they're frequenting in such smaller populations and in such smaller home ranges as well. Because and I think it's kind of intuitive, we're looking at mass destruction of wetlands across the states, and spotted turtles are very dependent on wetlands. Now, in the northeastern states, they're seeming to be a little bit more stabilized. Same with the South, but the Midwest, obviously not. There's still a, uh, a gap of knowledge in that area. And so, for us to say, what we know about the populations currently in the Midwest is we can't, because there's not enough research or evidence. I mean, Michigan just started demographics with MNFI and John Ball Zoo 2 years ago, and spotted turtles have been there for how long? And
Yeah,
so I think it's also, yeah, I think it's geographic. I think it's topography, it's habitat. I mean, spotted turtles are preoccupying quite different habitat types. They're also larger in just body mass and size in the south and northeastern areas. And I mean, I've heard them being called ditch turtles, like they're occupying ditches. And
yeah.
is that because there's no longer enough quality wetlands, or just wetlands in general, or is it because they've adapted to urbanization? So it's just very different based on geographic distribution.
I feel like at least where I am, their habitat was so heavily fragmented that they're just trapped in these little areas, and
Mhm.
especially with all kinds of industry and pollution nearby. I wonder if that contributes to their appearance at all. Because it's like, yeah, it's they're spotted turtles, but I'm like, this is like the ugliest possible spotted turtle. I'm like, they've got none at all. Well, some of the ones you posted or have shared photos of, it looks like the spots were painted onto them. Like
Right.
I've
I know.
never seen anything like that. That's incredible.
Yeah, I think that, I'm sure there are some studies out there that are looking at pollution, but I think it's also diet too. And so if we do have heavy, I think they coincide really well with one another, right? So if you have a heavy polluted wetland or heavy polluted area, the carrion and the biodiversity of aquatic inverts, which is their main diet,
Yeah.
or even just vegetation, is going to be very limited. And so because of that, that is probably going to change, their physical appearance and their morphology. And so I think that along with that, you have such isolated populations that they're probably inbreeding over and over and over. So they're not going to be having these very luxurious colors. So I think there's multiple different factors. And mind you, this is very anecdotal for me because I have not researched this. So I would recommend someone to go and look up. But again, there's not a ton of papers on it. So maybe that could be someone's thesis. Who knows? There you go, Jack.
That's good.
I was gonna say, yeah, I was curious. I was gonna say, like, could there be a genetic effect to some of that discoloration? Like you said, I'm curious, like the connectivity between the habitat Jack's familiar with and your study site and other places you've worked. I mean, maybe there's less connectivity where Jack is, and that could explain that. That is interesting.
Mhm.
And of course,
Yeah.
I don't know what either of you guys know about this. How are those? what's the point of the spots, kind of? Is that something that they're using visually, or, is it really deleterious to lose those spots?
Um, that is a really great question. I found that it does obscure them really well in the type of environments that they're in, but at the same time, I mean, for instance, if you look at, there's a lot of the environments that they preoccupy, they have cinquefoil. Cinquefoil flowers are yellow,
Mhm.
and when they fall apart, their petals individually fall apart. So there's been many of time where I'm searching for a spotted turtle, and I'm like, yeah, I found it, and then it's cinquefoil flowers, and then I absolutely just throw my telemetry gear. So I think that could be it. I think that it could be a predator deterrence. Bright colors obviously mean that if you're consuming the individual, it's poisonous. And so, what's it called? Aposematism. And so I think that could be another possibility of it too. What's interesting is that I don't know too much about the adaptation or of the reason of why they have spots, but we have found that over time, if something makes the animal more conspicuous, for instance, rattlesnakes. So we're looking at Massasauga rattlesnake in a couple of field sites, and in the field site I was in, they didn't rattle anymore. And when I've stepped over so many, and they were just quiet, which is really, unusual for a rattlesnake, right? And I think it's because this is such a heavily researched area. There used to not be a lot of foot traffic. Now there are for research purposes. That I think that the rattlesnake was learning that, oh, the rattle is going to give me away, because we would capture them
Yeah.
for research purposes and re-release them. And so I wonder too later on, especially because spotted turtles are so vulnerable to poaching, could this be an adaptation later on that they could be losing their spots? Or is this just dietary? And then as we are seeing more pollution, less biodiversity in terms of their dietary needs, could they be losing their spots because of that too? So I think there's many different ways we could answer that question. But those are the best ones that I think I know of right now.
Yeah, just interesting stuff to think about for people
Mhm.
that, listening have questions, students, that kind of thing. Uh, I want to revisit the home range stuff
Yeah.
briefly. Just something that's always interesting to me is, a home range, you're looking at average densities, sizes within years, across years, that kind of thing. But it seems like in most studies that have a decent amount of turtles, there's always one or two that move a strange amount more than others. I'm curious
Yeah.
if you had that experience and if you could pinpoint why a certain individual was like that, if it happened.
Yeah, it did happen. I had a male that would just kinda just it's always the males. And I've noticed that, I mean, in my wood turtle population I study now, our, blandings as well, males will just suddenly jut off, and then you're just pulling out your hair trying to find it. So I had a male that did that, and I also had 2 males that did that on separate occasions. I think that, why they make these big moves, I think it's either for in search of mates, or males will tend to stay out longer, especially when it gets closer to, the overwintering time. I think they want to forage more, maybe copulate more. And so they're just a little bit more driven to search. I don't really know exactly what truly influenced this very large home range. I mean, this turtle's home range, and mind you, I was doing AKDEs, which is autocorrelated kernel density estimations, which is a projected or a predicted model. And so this turtle ended up having like a 10-hectare home range, which is pretty wild. When the average home range for these individuals were around 2 to 3. So that was pretty extensive. And so I think that it was either in search of mating, thinking about also this population is pretty dense. So it could be territorial issues too. Maybe there's over competition. So this male is deciding either got kicked out or wants to extend its home range to either avoid or maybe fight a male. I don't know. So there's a lot of different theories of why that could happen. I'm not too sure, and that's something I'd love to actually study. I want to look at a little bit of spotted turtle ecology here in Massachusetts. I didn't really focus it on it too much this year, and I'm hoping to answer some of these questions honestly this year.
That's awesome. It's good to have a framework too. I imagine you have all the, from doing your thesis, you could just kind of get the data and plug it in
Yeah.
for what you need, right? Yeah,
Hmm.
that
Yeah,
makes a
for
lot of
sure.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that that's really interesting. It's not something you mentioned with the home range stuff early, and then maybe we could talk more about the habitat work that you did. That's really interesting to me. But the home range, so you had previous data from this site, and so you
Mhm.
look for some of these turtles to see. I mean, how does that range compare over? I think it was 10 years or something. I don't know exactly, but I'm curious, that's a unique thing. I mean, were those ranges different? Did they stay the same? I mean, what did you see there?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were lucky to capture 2 individuals that, John Rowe, our Dr. Rowe from Alma University had studied in the past. And so to have a good comparison or accurate comparison, we ran MCPs just like many people in the past did because that was the most common home range. And so tracking these 2 individuals, they had such high site fidelity, but also the same home range pattern. And I would say that there was maybe, I don't know, a 10% difference, but I mean, if you look, I wish I could share the photos I have of their home ranges, but it's almost identical. They have not moved, they have not, shifted. And I think, what that attests to is that how important their environment is and how dependent they are on the resources within their environment. They go right to the vernal pool, to the wetland again to forage, and then back to the hibernacula where they have high site fidelity there too, and they overwinter communally. So with these 2, and they were both females, so I don't really know about the males if that was any different, unfortunately, because I was only able to capture 2 females. But the females exhibited the exact same pattern, home range of, going back and forth. And it was completely confined within John Rowe's study as well. They have the same home ranges that he found. And there was barely any difference. I think one was a little bit smaller, and that was attributed to drought because one year it was just completely dried up. The vernal pool really didn't fill up. And then the wetland, there just wasn't enough groundwater to inundate the deer trail. So they just confined to conserve energy, but still within that little triangle, right? And I think that's pretty phenomenal. And I think, doing studies like that where we can find the same animal that hasn't passed away and be able to track them to kind of give us an idea of what kind of habitats are they selecting, but like how dependent are they on these habitats? So this can attest to, oh, if we're going to be fragmenting, that's going to completely disturb a generational pattern that they're instinctive to. So then suddenly, they're losing half of their home range. They're going to be changing it up. They're going to be going different ways. Are they going to survive? They're very resilient, but still, there's a lot of really important questions to think about when we are looking at studies like this.
Yeah, it was I saw those figures at in the figures of your thesis, and I was like, that blew me away. The
Right.
MCP was almost exactly the same. I mean, the like sides of it
Yeah.
looked exactly the same. That
Mhm.
was really interesting to see.
Yeah, I was blown away when I ended up doing it too, and, getting John's data. I was just like, "Wow, that's just incredible," and he did it. I mean, he published it in 2012, I believe, but when he conducted it was in 2006. So that was almost 20 years,
Oh,
20
wow.
years of the same pattern, right?
Wow. Yeah.
So again, all that attests to is
Crazy.
like how important, keeping these pristine habitats is, for these animals, how reliant they are on these habitats. So, yeah, it's phenomenal. Sorry, my cat.
I think at times we can take the lifespan of turtles
Mhm.
for granted because it makes this sort of comparison possible. A lot of other animals, it would be over generations, not the individual lifespans.
Yeah, I mean, you remember,
So
like, growing up, I remember people having pet, obviously red-eared sliders, pet turtles or any type of reptile, and they died, within 3 years. So when you're young, if you don't know, you're looking at this going, "Oh, they don't live that long," just like a dog or a cat. But really, these are such historic creatures, and they are so long-lived that, they have been adapting to us, which is crazy. And
yeah.
my boss, I went to do a wood turtle survey with him. He finds this old male that he's had and he's been tracking for so long. He said, "This male is over 60 years old." And like that's just mind blowing to me, to have this turtle do the same routine, be in the same area, the same riverine system that has not been disturbed for over 60 years. That's crazy.
That
Especially you've got experience with
Mhm,
Blanding's turtles too. It's like those are just insanely long-lived. Like, that's just mind-boggling.
mhm. Yeah,
So, yeah, all just about it's just the point where, like, something like a chicken turtle's an outlier among, like, the rest where, 15,
right.
20 years is the extent of their
Yeah.
lifespan.
And it depends on their activities too, and so I
Yeah,
think we are seeing a lot of longer lived species in the north because they're conserving their energy more, which, I feel is a
yeah.
little more intuitive, but, they're with a smaller home range, and then they're conserving their energy for maybe 4 months or 5 months out of the season, and with their metabolic rates, it makes sense of why they're living so long and their regenerative properties as well, so it's just really cool to experience that.
Well, yeah, it's like a big chunk of the year
Mhm.
they're not active. Well, if they're in the South, you gotta be active the entire
Exactly.
year. Yeah, there was like, it's like that Algonquin Park. I don't remember the study's name, but well, the common snapping turtles
Yeah.
lifespan there is just
Mhm.
insane. Like some of the same turtles have been recaptured over something like 50 years, but same body size. It's like that's just incredible to live for something to live that long, like longer than human
Yeah,
lifespan, easy.
absolutely.
But
Yeah, I know exactly what study you're talking about too, and I think it's really interesting, because, when people look at these animals, they think, "Oh, they're gonna be growing forever," especially as they keep going, but then they limit out, and then, they look the same for so long, and you wonder sometimes if we weren't here, how long would they really live?
it's like indeterminate versus determinate
Mhm,
growth. Like even most, it kind of kills me with people sometimes because they're just even with things like alligator snapping turtles, they want to associate size directly with age, and like it's more
mhm,
complicated than that. I'm like there's so many factors. There's the environment, the diet, and most of them hit a certain point where they're going to stop growing. They're not just going to grow continuous. It's not
mhm,
linear. They're not like it's not like they're going to be a 200-year-old turtle is going to be 200 pounds. It's like no, I've got plenty of experience with animals that are ancient, could be 100 years old or more, but, it might be a male that's
mhm,
only 70 pounds versus something that's, twice that size, but just a far younger animal that had access to different resources and grew up in a different
mhm.
environment. So, I think even with reptiles in general, people tend to, like, just think it's a linear relationship between age and size, and it's a little bit more
Yeah,
complicated than that.
absolutely.
with something that was like another aspect of your thesis that I was really interested in is the habitat selection analysis that you did. And I've worked with pond turtles in California looking at how urbanization impacts them. And that's something where I didn't do it in a spatial way. It was more of a observational way, but regardless, the analysis you used for that and determining, are they spending more time or less time proportional to the availability of different habitat types was really interesting, and I'm just curious, what were the major insights from that? And just yeah, what did you learn from that analysis?
I think, what I learned is it's funny, what I thought back then versus now. Um, and it's so geographically dependent and it's so habitat dependent. But for this specific population is that they're utilizing these habitats disproportionate of this large availability. So really what this insight was is that they're really dependent on vernal pools, they're really dependent on water, and the wetlands, and that's it. And so, but that is specific to this population. And I think for others, obviously we may be seeing something different. And again, that could be based off of habitat fragmentation, urbanization, or it just what's available. But obviously, these turtles are really dependent on their resources, and that attributes to site fidelity, that attributes to longevity. And so I think that is an important takeaway for conservation is that, okay, if we're seeing that they're using these habitats over everything else, these are the habitats to target in terms of invasive species management, of cutting out for looking at. I wish I looked a little bit more actually at canopy cover and how important that is too for their distribution and a lot of these different factors, and I think that that will really be helpful for management, but again it is very geographic dependent. So, continuing to conduct habitat selection studies and then even looking at more microhabitat to look at, dietary requirements and all of those experiences but yeah, I think that it would be really beneficial for conservation management is just continuing to learn about, their specific habitat selections at different geographical locations. Yeah. Let me
You
know
went
if
by
that did
pretty quick
answer your
though.
question though.
Yeah, I mean, it was I just thought it was really
Yeah.
interesting and then, like and just got me thinking a lot about with the pond turtles and other things, if you got some transmitters on how much more you could get at some of those questions. We used, like a basking observation and then an end mixture model that you can use the basking observations to generate
Um,
abundance estimates.
mhm.
I don't know. I mean, it's there's some sort of violations that we made with that. And I just think if we could put some transmitters on those turtles, we could learn so much more
Right.
specifically about at least some of the hypotheses that generated. But
Yeah,
yeah, you go
oh, I
ahead.
was gonna say, now that I remember what I was trying to get to, but, I think what also habitat selection analyses do tell us is where they're gonna be in the landscape and when, and depending on their active season. And so, this is telling us, oh, in the spring they're gonna be in vernal pools at this specific geographic, area, and then in the summer they're gonna be in the wetlands, and then if there's not a lot of water, where are they going? And how dependent they are on these different resources. So that really in turn tells us in terms of management going, okay, during these specific times, if I want to burn, I know that they're not going to be in the forest in the fall versus December, right? And we have found in terms of management implications that, when you don't have that type of knowledge, and then you just try to manage an area based off of one animal versus multiple, then you have mismanagement. So learning more about these species is really important in terms of, just managing these ecosystems as a whole.
Right.
Yeah, and it's got me thinking, like, seeing your thesis and all of like, in great detail, the work that you did is, like, made me think about my mud turtle population that I work with in Delaware, and there's so much
Mhm.
mystery to them. I have no clue what they're doing most of the time, and it's like, there's so it's just so much mystery. It's like, if we knew more about where they were at what time of the year, what they were doing, and the only thing I know is that they do move quite a bit because I've got a big site, and they go all the way for at least all the way from the top to the bottom of where I
Mhm.
sample, and I don't know if they use the floodplain habitats at all because down south they're usually going to be in more of
Mhm.
that kind of stuff, but up where I'm from, it's very different. They're like almost exclusively like in the loading
Yeah,
systems, so I don't know where they're nesting. I don't know, like, we don't know anything about them. The only thing we know is the basic morphometric data that I've got
right.
at this point.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's like I may present again at TSA
Do it.
this year and give it a much
Yeah.
deeper, like, a deeper version of the one, and definitely not 6 minutes, but
Yeah, I
yeah.
definitely I'm gonna try to go to this TSA. I have a study that I'd like to we just kind of wrapped up. It's gonna probably just be a note at this point, but to still talk about. But yeah, definitely, present at TSA again. It's a great opportunity.
It was fun. Yeah, even yeah, and I'm looking forward to I didn't present at the last one. I just showed up and, like, hung around, and we did some podcast episodes, and, like, it was just fun,
I
but
love the TSA because
yeah,
it's
I'd
like
like
a
to
family get together at this point, and I don't know, it's
yeah,
like
it is.
I remember being nervous to go, especially as a woman, to the TSA because I had heard some, weird things in the past, and then I had talked to Cody, and he was like, "You need to come. It's great. I'll make sure you're okay." And honestly, I've never felt more comfortable being around all these people that I would really call like some of my closest friends and family now, and I talk to on a regular basis. So I think that's like the benefit of,
Yeah.
I know this is a little off topic, but the benefit of going to conferences is that you're making these connections that honestly have helped me get jobs, have helped me create a community too. And I think that's just what's like really special about that.
Oh, it's incredible, especially, like, when we started going at, like, a younger age to just it's just everything was just meeting all of these people and getting the networking and connections is just, like, invaluable, like, you don't get that anywhere else, like, to that
Totally.
degree. So
I've been fortunate. I've been able to go for a long time now. My first one I was 12 or 13. But it's just like
Jesus
a lot of
Wow.
these yeah, a lot of these the people there, I've looked up to them a lot and I still do obviously, but like the last few, it's been kind of that transition from being a young guy that you gotta whatever to it's like, okay, wow, these people are actually just like you said, family. And it's like
Yeah.
yeah,
yeah,
it's really cool.
I know, it's so funny because I remember meeting Wit for the first time, and I was just like, "Oh, this is
yeah.
Whit Gibbons," and then, and he's like, "Oh, Mick, how are you?" And so then in the next one, he's, like, coming up and asking me how my research is, he remembers my name, and then I'm walking with him and Jeff
He
he
always
always
remembers. That's
remembers,
the
and I was
thing.
just like, "Ooh, I'm
He
so."
always remembers. I don't know how he does that.
But, no, it
Yeah,
was just such a humble person to talk to, and then I remember just, like, the last one I went to, I'm walking with Wit and Jeffrey Lovitch, and I felt like and that's such a nerdy thing, but I was just like I felt like the coolest person. I was like, "Oh my gosh, look at me," like, but it's like and then these people are just, like, normal
yeah,
people that you just look up to, and I think that it's really cool to, like you said, when you're young versus being integrated into this community as a researcher, but a colleague and as a friend. And it's just it's such a special experience.
Yeah, it was. We had a similar the last one, there was a whole group of people, a lot of the like Russ Mittermeier, all these guys, and we had a long conversation. At one point, he's just like, "Yeah, where are we going? When are we going to look for turtles?" And it was just like, yeah, it
that's
was just
insane to
Right.
us.
crazy.
It's like we're like looking up to these people, reading all their
Mhm.
books and papers, and since we're young, and it's like now we're just hanging. We just get to hang out with them.
I
Like that's
know. And
epic.
then, I think for me, it gives me hope that like maybe I could be like that person for someone else one day, to
Yeah,
to be continuously inspired to work with these people, to become colleagues with them, and then hope to emulate who they are as researchers and as individuals, that you do look up to. And then to be that for someone else too, to inspire them because we want to continue to broaden our scientific community and our community for freshwater turtles because they are so under researched, they're so overlooked. And I think that, being with these people, it really helps us and motivates us.
Yeah, and it's cool. I mean, people can that have accomplished a lot, they can take multiple paths with it, but it's cool, like you said, how open these really accomplished people are. Because just that experience of getting to talk with them, I feel like, at least for me, it's more formative than just learning about the turtles. It's like you kinda get to know a person and think about how did they get to where they're at, and you can piece together that, and yeah, it's just really cool. Well,
Yeah.
I wonder if we can sorta switch up a little bit to okay, so we've talked a bit about the things that you found and, in your thesis, that sort of thing, and
Mhm.
there's one aspect of, I think, doing research that everyone has a different leniency towards it or interest in it. It's the coding and the statistics and all that. With the spatial
yeah.
stuff, I mean, you for your thesis at least, and you've done more work using the spatial framework, but you did some kinda next level things with those kernel density estimates, and so I'm curious, I mean, were you interested in coding before? Did you learn it on the go? I mean, how did that evolve?
So when I started grad school, I knew nothing of coding. Like I knew of R. I had one professor use it for me for my undergrad senior thesis, which I did on lionfish. But I had nothing. I knew nothing, and so I was forced to learn. And let me tell you, I have had so many nights up till 4 in the morning crying my eyes out, going, "I hate this. Why isn't this working?" Um, but I am so grateful that I was given this opportunity to learn on my own. And I shouldn't say on my own. I've had a lot of help. One thing I love about the research world is that there's so many people, no matter if they've met you in person or not, across the world that will help you. And so I've had some colleagues that have helped me with my code and taught me quite a bit. And I think that really pushed me to continue to learn and then be that person for the next person because that saved me for my thesis, especially when I was completely stuck. Um, remember I was I was looking for this one specific code and I just could not figure it out. And I was talking to this researcher in India. I've never met him. He's like, do you want to do a Zoom? And I was like, please. And it's 2 in the morning where he is. He's finishing his PhD on foxes. And his name's Anhan, and such a lovely person. And he walked me through it. He helped me. And then I had another friend, Kaio, who helped me with my Nova, because unfortunately just the stuff that I was doing, because I did so much research and I realized, oh, I don't want to do MCP or KDE. I want to do this next level home range that I think will be a good forefront to start the herpetology community to start looking at like this home range as a predictive model. And so because of that, no one in my university had experience with this at all. And so it's like, I'm so screwed. And then it just really pushed me where I ended up spending probably my last 2 semesters just coding, just learning how to code all on my own. I mean, I took a couple classes, but it was just really on me and just the help of amazing people. And so that was really tough. But now I'm not daunted anymore by coding, and I do it all the time. And I kind of look at it as like a fun challenge. Like if I don't understand it, I'm going to learn why, I'm getting these errors, why, there's a, incorrect syntax. And then I can be helpful for other people too. Like I've co-authored a couple papers where, I'm helping out with the spatial ecology now. And before, I didn't know anything. Same thing like with turtles. I didn't know anything about turtles. And now look at me, right? And so hopefully that can give inspiration for people who are, they're going into a situation where they have no knowledge on it. And they're like, I can't do this. Like, they're not going to hire me, or they're not going to take me to grad school because I don't, I know nothing on this. And it's like, I mean, same, but you learn. And then that's how you advertise yourself. It was like, I'm so willing to learn and I'm so willing to do it on my own and have that, push and determination that it has made me into a better researcher.
I think that speaks to the connectivity of the academic world too. Like everybody's got to bring their own expertise and
Mhm.
from each other, because no one person knows how to do everything all completely
Exactly.
by themselves. Like everything's all about teamwork at the end of the day. Like everyone's got to work
Yes.
together. So I noticed you co-authored a paper with
Mhm.
Jordan Danini. So how did you come to meet him and get involved in all
Yeah.
of that?
I met
Was that
Yeah, it
TSA?
was. I met Jordan through Cody
Yeah.
because Cody was a really good friends with a guy I went to undergrad with, and they went to grad school together. And so I met Cody through him, and then Cody introduced me to Jordan. And then, I presented my first TSA, and I think Jordan and I had spoke a little bit about my spatial ecology and experience and my knowledge. And then he invited me down to his box turtle bonanza in Florida with another friend of mine. So we went down there, and he was like, "Hey, I'm doing this research with Florida box turtles. Would you be able to help me with spatial ecology? Because some people just were not taught R, and he knows a little bit about R, but just was not proficient in spatial ecology." I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And so, working with him gets my name on a paper, helps him publish something, helps him understand a little bit more about these populations that he's working with. And so actually I just talked to him on another paper, I think it was with mud turtles, and we just FaceTime and went through the code together. And so I was able to kind of go line by line and teach him, this is what this does, and this is what this does, so that now hopefully he's be able to do it on his own and teach other people too, and make him feel confident in his own work. And so I think that's what's really exciting, is like getting to work with colleagues and getting to help and teach them, just as, other colleagues and people have done for me. And I love Jordan. He's great.
Yeah, we're
Oh,
having
you
him
are?
next weekend. I
Yay.
think that's
That's
yeah. We haven't had him on yet at this point. And then I think he's bugged
I'm
us
sure
about
he
that a couple
has.
times. I'm like,
I love it.
yeah, I'm like, I know. We went through periods of backlog and everything, but yeah, having those skills you have are definitely valuable, and it's got to really help getting involved with all sorts of different
I
cool
I think it's
projects.
helped
So
literally land some of my jobs. I mean, I feel like with my current job, it really helps because I mean, I'm doing statistical analyses. I'm not really doing as much with spatial ecology right now, but I'm doing statistical analyses that I think that if someone else had the same field experience I had, but didn't have statistical analyses experience, I think that they wouldn't have gotten this position. And so It is really important, depending on what you want to do, mind you. You don't have to go in this field going, I have to be really good at R, because if you want to be a field biologist or you want to be a tech, you don't want to be in academia, you don't really need those skills. But if you want to be, involved in research, I think it's a really important asset to have.
I'm curious about specifically because I don't know a ton about the spatial stuff, but I from what I understand, the novelty to the model that you used is that it incorporates some of the effects from the autocorrelation of when you track a turtle over time, the things that model predicts are going to be linked just due to the proximity of the points.
Mhm.
I'm curious why the model that you chose, I mean, why you chose it and what that updates from past ways to estimate home range.
Um, you know, I think this is a great model to use for a lot of home ranges. Looking back with herpetology, there is a lot of requirements for this model that unfortunately when you're tracking herps, it doesn't meet. Herps don't move that much, especially turtles. And so this model requires quite a few points and locations, but in the middle of summer when this turtle's estimating, you're not going to get much. So there are some downsides that are important to be aware, but unfortunately, this model goes through an AIC and it will match up your locations and your frequencies based off of this predictive modeling, and then it will go with the best scenario. And so I think for choosing this one, I don't know. I didn't know much about home range, but when I started researching, I realized how many flaws were in an MCP and a KDE of under over inflation. And then we are forgetting about the autocorrelation in between movements. What's predicting these movements? Is it habitat? Is it selection function? And so to have that autocorrelation of prediction of where can these animals go? Because we just talked about earlier, I had a male that just jutted off and for no reason. So if I were doing an MCP, it probably wouldn't have included a lot of other habitat that he may have used that I completely missed. And that's also really important for management too, because I think having predictive modeling also looks at encompassing habitats that we may not include for management, and we may not think about these animals utilizing. So I think that's why I really, pushed for this home range, is because I want it to be used for management purposes. Because if we underestimate home ranges and suddenly we have developers coming in and we're like, oh, well, based on these home ranges and this threatened species, we can build here. And then we find out that actually, no, they still use this area because we underestimated it. So I think even if there's quite a few flaws, which there are, on when using herpetofauna and AKDEs, I still think it is the appropriate method to use because of that.
I'm curious. If it's using AIC, then the model is because as I understand it, I could be wrong about this, but the MCP more traditional way is pretty simple. It's just matching points.
Yeah.
But this model is actually extrapolating out based on the patterns and the things that are driving the pattern to places that maybe the turtle didn't go, but it probably goes.
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay, that's really interesting. That makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why it includes, date and time and then, your location, because you're looking at, all right, from one consecutive point to another, when was this during this time? When was this during another? And then just moving forward from that. And so I think that's what sets it apart from connecting the dots. Um, and so, yeah, I really like that method a lot. I haven't used it in a while, so I'm a little rusty on the terminology, so apologize for that. But yeah, definitely I would look into it. And Chris Fleming has a Google, oh, what is it? It's like this web format that he is so responsive to any questions about, because he's a creator of this whole code and this whole CTMM package, which is where AKD comes out of. And so if you have any questions, I have a lot of colleagues who have asked me and I'm like, I'm stumped, ask Chris, and you can go on this Google forum, post a question, or either find someone else asking the same ones. And that's what's really awesome. And he's so responsive within a day. And sometimes you'll look at him and you're like, wow, am I dumb? But, he's pretty graceful and very, very helpful and just really intelligent too. I'm just, blown away with the fact that someone can create a model like that. Hopefully, I'll get there one day, but not right now.
Yeah, that's the different I mean, that's like it is that's again a testament to how the sciences are so connected. Like I don't know, is he's might have a background in computer science or something like that, or is it I mean, that sort of thing. It's
I think he does.
yeah,
Yeah,
but like I mean, plenty of people that build those packages, they're not necessarily in it for the wildlife. They just want
right.
to assist, and it's cool to see all that come together.
Truly. Yeah, no, for sure.
So one of the things about that you assumed, and I mean, it makes perfect sense that would be the case. I just wonder, like you said, there's some things about the model that aren't maybe realistic, but is that the home range size is independent, and I can think of a scenario where maybe the turtles influence where they're going or where they'll be. Is that something that could be possible?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for your assumptions, these are just unexplained beliefs that we kind of either have an intuitive knowledge on or we're inferring. And so having, saying that our home ranges are independent also helps with coding because our coding also has specific assumptions that need to be met and or requirements, but also, looking at home ranges, we're assuming that they're going to be influenced by foraging, nutrition, or and resources, habitat selection, and not by another individual's home range. So we're looking at each individual home range separately. If we all looked at them collectively together, then that would be a little different. But that's just an automatic assumption that is kind of a part of science, and I could be completely disproven wrong. I do think it can. I think that maybe one turtle's home range could influence the other based off of territory. You could have like one more aggressive male versus a more passive male or a smaller male. You could be having competition of resources. So within that home range, you have multiple turtles competing for resources that could butt other ones out. So absolutely, it could be, it could be a nullified hypothesis, but yeah, I think that in terms of the general assumption of, are they being influenced by habitat, resources, water, and all these other ones, is it will help separate these individuals in case we do have a the 10-hectare turtle happening, and then we're looking at that. So yeah, it can be.
Right. That's interesting. I'm it just this is all making me think. I mean, it seems like, pushing the limits and expanding on these models and applying it to turtles. Where in 5, 10 years do you think I mean, what are some of the unexpected ways that spatial analyses could inform turtle conservation that you're excited about?
um So I think like the biggest thing is like for climate change.
Mm,
We're looking at rising sea levels, and we actually have. I mean, if we're talking just specifically about spotted turtles, we have a lot of populations either on the coastline. We have some in Massachusetts that are actually on islands, which is pretty crazy. And so when we're looking at climate change, this is going to help us predict and understand where are they going to be moving when we have these extreme droughts or extreme flooding. We have quite I actually went to one site that there's no longer spotted turtles there, but there was sea overwash. And so looking at these home ranges can help us understand, will they be completely decimated by this overwash, or will they move to another habitat, based on their home ranges. And so I think that that will be the benefit of having predictive home range models and just looking at home ranges and spatial ecology of these animals in general, because as we're seeing each year, it's getting worse and worse. How are these animals adapting? And then by tracking them, it can tell us, and then we can provide appropriate management, references, and even like I was working on the IUCN assessment for spotted turtles. That it's helping us looking at predictive models of what's going to happen in the next 100 years, what's going to happen to these populations, and spatial ecology is a big proponent of that.
that's interesting. The IUCN, I mean, I'm sure there's some of that you can't talk about all that, but just stuff that you can say. I mean, how has that been to help with that analysis?
Yeah, so It's more of a collection of papers and to prove or disprove the status of an animal. And so we're not doing specific analyses, but we're taking as much relevant and recent information along with past information to look at the trends. And so working with some experts in the field, like Jackie Litzkis and Houston Chandler and Mike Jones and Liz Wiley was really exciting just because I got to learn a lot from them too, especially, as much as I've worked with spotted turtles, I can't say I know everything. And so to learn about what's happening in the Ontario area versus what's happening in the South, realizing how stable populations are over here versus in the Midwest, they're really not. But is it because we're lacking information? So it was. I felt very honored to be a part of it too. To like, I never, when I look at myself in grad school versus now, I never really expected myself to be here. And I think that's partially on imposter syndrome, but it was a very honorable experience to be a part of this new assessment. And I feel like I can't say too much more, but yeah.
Based on like your experiences and your work, what do you think the trajectory is for the future of the spotted turtle? Do you think it's probably pretty grim in some areas, I would imagine, but range wide, how do you think the species is going to be in the next 100 years? Are they going to lose a lot of territory, potentially get extirpated from
I
states?
think they
Like,
will in certain states. I think other states, they're doing okay if we do continue our proper management and if we relist some species in the states, because unfortunately some have been delisted. And but yeah, I think that in the Midwest, I find I love the Midwest. I love my home, but it's very game species oriented. So not a lot of funding and grants go into herpetofauna. And as we've seen also, like for instance, in Ohio, they've lost over 90% of their wetlands. So then any turtles that are utilizing these wetlands have nowhere to go. And so without proper management or proper education or highlighting the decline of these species, yeah, we're going to absolutely see them decimate, especially as we continue to boom in population and attributing to climate change. Guaranteed people are going to be moving from the west to the Midwest to the East Coast, where it's wherever it's not going to be as affected as much. So then you're losing less and less, you're more and more wetlands, and you have less and less space for these animals. So I do think that it just really depends on the area of the trajectory of the species.
That leads me into a question. We through the podcast, we raised a little bit of money, which was really cool, and we got to donate it to someone, and we all decided this guy Caleb Kruger. It's
I love Caleb. I've worked with him a lot.
okay, yeah, yeah, yeah.
really?
So because he's at MSU, I think, or Iowa
Mhm.
State, or both. And yeah, so he's doing the money's going to go towards his spotted turtle biogeography stuff in the Midwest, which is
Cool.
really, and he's pretty incredible what he's already done.
Oh
But
yeah.
so I was talking to him a little bit about that, and I realized like that's just not what I associate with the spotted turtle habitat. It's more the northeastern stuff, and so
Right.
like, where are the biggest unknowns in terms of the population dynamics and the range of the species and anything about them in the Midwest in particular?
I would say probably Indiana. I think there's barely anything being done. And think that their populations are so scarce that there's really just not much known about them in that state. Um, they're quite known in Ohio and in Michigan. There's more attention being derived towards this species, but in Indiana, I would say is the underdog or the one coming in last in terms of spotted turtle research or conservation management. Um, so I think that for Indiana, we need to start doing demography studies and looking at where are these populations that are still extant, doing habitat selection, conducting home ranges, and just seeing how big are these populations, what are they looking like versus historical data, and then seeing what kind of urbanizations around there and how can we manage these populations, and looking at also genetics. Are they inbreeding? Will these populations still survive in the next 50 years if they're becoming so isolated and their habitats becoming so fragmented. So I know what Caleb is doing is pretty fantastic. So I'm really excited to see his results. I actually worked a lot with him last year, I think, when I worked at the John Ball Zoo. So yeah, Caleb's great.
Yeah, he's something that with the I was looking through his sex determining systems work, and it's just fascinating what he's been able to do with that even, and be exciting
Wow.
to see, what all of you guys can cumulatively showcase in the future with these turtles, and it's fascinating.
Yeah.
Um, I'm curious something. So now, I mean, you're in Massachusetts, and I'm curious, how did that come to be, and what is your day-to-day like now?
Yeah. So
Yeah, I was curious about
yeah,
that.
I know. I feel like I post kind of like random stuff online. So I got this job because I went to a presentation that my boss is Mike Jones. He's a state herpetologist, and he was hosting in Pennsylvania. And like I said, I squeezed in a talk last minute, or I had told you guys before we start recording, squeezed in a talk last minute about my thesis.
Yeah.
And so he got to meet me and was really grateful that he could squeeze me in. And so then I was helping out with the CCITT, which is the pretty much the conservation of illegal trade of turtles. And someone had sent me this job posting in Massachusetts, and I was like, you know what? There's not much going on in Michigan. It's really hard to find another herpetology job that will, keep me on my feet pretty much. And so then,
Yeah.
yeah, I applied for this job, and Mike remembered me, and they had selected me out of quite a few candidates, which made me feel very good. And then I moved over here, and it's been quite a whirlwind. It's, as much as you can translate and take all the knowledge you have of the same turtle species from the Midwest, completely different over here. And so
Yeah.
my day to day is very variable. And so some days I will be looking and running wood turtle surveys in the middle of, well, I can't say, but like, Western Mass. And then the next day I'll be in
Yeah.
Northern Mass looking at Blanding's turtles and figuring out, can we, trap for these areas, and also tracking a extant population that we've been continually to track the last couple of years. And then the next day, I'm headed out to the Cape to look for spotted turtles or box turtles, or I'm headed to an island very last minute to do the same thing. And I think it's just about taking as much opportunity as you can. And what I've learned from Mike is anything we do can be turned into an experiment, which is pretty cool, and can be tested. And so that because of that, I've gotten that free range where I was able to this summer run a hypothesis looking at the wood turtle as an umbrella species for riparian biodiversity. So I was, in the midst of every single day driving 5 hours here, 5 hours another place. I was also running these tests and surveys looking at riparian biodiversity in correlation to wood turtle abundance. And so that's something I'm going to be writing a note on upcoming, which is really exciting. And so getting those opportunities, and we're continuing to do that. We're helping out. We have this huge head starting program for our northern red belly cooters. So as part of that as well. And then also it's about outreach. So I've made a lot of connections here from different organizations, but also reaching out to schools and presenting at schools, and also at different organizations just to educate the public about what's going on about our turtles. And one thing I've noticed too, versus like the East and the Midwest, is people really care here. Like there are so many people that really just like, and to almost not a fault, but to a point where, sometimes we're like, hey, this is actually good management versus bad management, but people care so much that they're so willing to participate. And that is really amazing because you don't see that as much in the Midwest. I think, people are more focused, again, like I said, on game species. And I think there's just not as much education and outreach. And so here, being able to do that and to teach people about our species here and the relevance and importance is just been really phenomenal. And I feel very lucky to have received this position and just work with so many different species, and including like bog turtles too. We only have two populations of bog turtles in Massachusetts, and getting to work with them. And then terrapin, kayaking 8 miles with some of our terrapin biologists, and helping them figure out, in terms of spatial ecology about like their movement and distribution and using end mixture models. So there's just so much, and I feel I'm spread quite thin because there's only one of me in the whole state. But it's been a phenomenal experience, honestly.
Yeah, yeah, it sounds like they've got you doing like all sorts of different things. Like you're going, and Massachusetts is a big state
No,
too, isn't it? Well, I mean, I could. Oh, hold on, hold on.
no,
I came from
Michigan's
Delaware. It's
huge.
bigger than that, isn't it?
It's
Let's
Well,
say,
yeah, to Jack
relatively
everything, yeah.
speaking. I to me, any state
That's
is
true.
big because I come from one that's 30 miles wide and
I
90
do forget
miles
about
long. So,
Delaware. I
like,
know.
yeah, like I could drive around that, but like, it sounds like you're putting
Oh
out a lot of
yeah,
hours of
no.
like driving, a lot of mileage, and that's awesome to be involved in so many
Mhm.
different projects. I guess with the terrapins is yeah, because it's like Shelby and Patrick are up in that area now too, right? What is she a student? What is she
Yeah,
studying up there?
I'm actually seeing them later today. So, Shelby, we're collaborating with her. She's doing a lot of or her PhD on blandings, and I think she's looking.
Okay, yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah, and she has a few objectives. So I don't want to say all of them because I don't remember all of them, and I don't want to,
Yeah,
screw it up. But I know she's going to be looking at nesting ecology and phenology, especially on an army base too. We're looking at how can where are these turtles nesting? We actually there's a paucity of information on Blanding's turtles, surprisingly, especially in the Northeast. And so because there's only this small patch of them, and so we're just trying to learn more, and I think that's a part of her position. And so she helped me out quite a bit this summer in terms of I was trying to trap a couple of areas to see if we could get some tags. We're utilizing satellite radio tags, which didn't work out as great as we had thought, but we're hoping that this upcoming summer they'll be really beneficial for nesting, so we don't have to go out in these areas that are a little bit more difficult of a terrain. But yeah, so she's helping out with that, but she's conducting her thesis on blandings. We're also looking at road mortality too, and looking at hotspots of road mortality, specifically for blandings too, as a higher priority area, and then hopefully to work with the towns in mitigating these huge hotspots. And how we do that, I'm not sure yet, but we're having a few meetings with that, and Shelby's a big part of that as well.
yeah, that's good to hear. I remember she'd moved quite a bit. She was working with terrapins for her
Yeah,
master's before, and like I was probably bothering her a lot about that because those are like the big megacephalic terrapins. I couldn't get
yeah,
enough of those. But yeah, I was just jealous. I wanted to
awesome.
come out and be a
Hmm.
part of that. But yeah, that's all awesome.
I'm curious, the Blandings turtle's real interesting to me because of the pond turtles, and they're all part of the little branch on the Amidon tree, and they're all together, and that was surprising to me because they don't look really. I mean, they actually do kinda look like a mix between a box turtle and a pond turtle to me, like a western pond turtle, but
Yeah.
I was just interested to see that. I'm curious because I mean, do you see similarities? Like, what is their data? What are their activities like in nature? Are they really straddling the border between are they more like a pond turtle, more like a box turtle? And how do they what is their yeah, what the behavior, I guess?
I think again, it depends on geographic distribution. What I've noticed is the habitats they occupy in the Midwest are very different than in Massachusetts, but also in Massachusetts, it's just what's available. And for what I've studied here is that they're utilizing a lot of bogs and vernal pools and any type of just ephemeral systems. And they will stay there and just really just jump in between wetland systems. And it's very rare that you will see them terrestrial. There's occasional times, if they're just going in between one wetland to another, but most of the time they will be either thermoregulating in these wetlands. And a lot of these wetlands either have to have some open water or just enough water to keep them hydrated. But we're really lucky. A couple of the species that we are studying, we're seeing them in these chained wetlands where they have so much opportunity, but there's still, there's some downsides of like invasive species, of encroaching white pines that are completely taking up canopy cover. But yeah, so I would say they're more aquatic than anything, but they can be terrestrial. Obviously, they're terrestrial when they're going to find nesting grounds. but I would say more than anything, they like the mucky button bush, boggy areas. And when I was in Michigan, though, I found them oftentimes, and they would mostly stay, I would say, in the vernal pools. But I did find a couple of times of them in the prairie fen. I found a hatchling, but also I found them communally estivating spotted turtle and Blanding's turtle in the same sphagnum mound, which I thought was really, I want to write a note on that, and I keep forgetting to do that. But I remember I was tracking the spotted turtle. I reached in there, which was not the smartest idea because there's Massasaugas there too. And I was like, wow, this spotted turtle is huge. And I pull out this female Blanding, and then I found a spotted turtle right next to one another. So it's really interesting, how they cohabit, in the same environments. But it is interesting because I feel that the Blanding's turtle habitat is a lot less treacherous than the ones in Massachusetts. I'm not gonna lie, I love Blandings, but going through that stuff is brutal. It sucks. Like, all of the emergent wetlands are just surrounded by greenbrier, and the bogs are like so deep in certain areas, and you just come out smelling like a garbage dump, and it's hard to get them too.
Yeah.
Like, if you can't really use waders sometimes because you're going to flood them. So you're just jumping in, up to your shoulders, trying to reach down to find them to make sure that it's, transmitter didn't pop off. And then you're just coming out just looking like a swamp monster. So in, Michigan, I didn't find that as hard. So
No, yeah, that sounds awesome. I get referred to as a skunk ape by a lot of my friends or family from going going out of like constantly coming out of the swamp or being in the water. But yeah, I remember seeing some photos you'd shared of tracking Blanding's turtles, and that looked like quite an interesting
oh
time
my gosh,
with
yeah, because like
all
they're
of
all
that
like
crazy happening.
like deep in the
Yes,
water.
like deep and yeah, like that's
Yeah.
insane. Yeah, the Blandings is like that's the one northeastern species that I haven't seen in the wild because I saw bog turtles last summer. So it's like, yeah, Blandings are like that's like a dream animal to see. They are amazing.
Yeah, maybe this summer if you have time, I can see if you can come and help out, and we can get you to see a Blanding's turtle.
Yeah, that would be incredible. I mean, I spend a lot of time up there. I go up annually for my mud turtle
Oh, cool.
surveys. So I spend a lot of time up in Delaware for maybe 3 weeks or so out of July. Usually right before TSA tends to be when I do that. But
Gotcha.
yeah, I've been
Okay.
working on that project. Actually, it was Jerry Johnston, like he's been like my greatest mentor with that. He helped me like I would never have started that like in high school if it wasn't for him. Uh he connected me with the state herpetologist there, and there's such a massive information gap on striped mud turtles in the northernmost part of their range. And I was part of the people that had made the first observations there. There was a kind of group of it, but there was literally no information known on the species. So I'm just filling the basic information gaps like on their morphology, but it's leading to deeper questions that I may want to pursue like down the line of like how is this species functioning up
Mhm.
here? It's wildly different than at the southern limit of their range. It's like incredible that it's the same species, but it's like you got to go about it a completely different way to trap for them and type of habitat. If you were to apply your knowledge about, okay, your typical striped mud turtle knowledge, how am I going to search for these animals? How am I going to navigate their environment? If you're doing that in Florida, it's very different than where I'm from. It's
Yeah,
like two different animals. It's been awesome to
that's
be a part of that.
awesome. Yeah, Jerry's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is always funny to look at species, especially when you're not as knowledgeable about a certain species, and you're like, oh, like a deer, they're gonna occupy the same habitat, in the Midwest versus the East versus the
Yeah.
South, and they're gonna all look the same. I find that for instance, like the wood turtles here are so much brighter than the ones in Michigan. Michigan, they're pale yellow on their underside, and then
Yep.
here they're just bright orange. And I think that can be chucked up to dietary and also just environment too. But also, same thing with Blandings. I find that the Blandings here are so much more vibrant. But also, and these animals are occupying so many different types of habitats than in their other
Yep.
portions of their geographic range. And I think that's the beauty of it. Is like you get to learn, and especially when there are knowledge gaps, you can be the person to help find that out and address
Yeah.
those questions. And that's exciting.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I've been very like it's been very exciting to be a part of it and to learn, like, and just a lot, especially going into it from the beginning, you don't always think what's going to happen or what you're going to find ends up being very different. And just seeing the degree of, like, I mean, just variation, phenotypic plasticity, and some of it's probably genetic. It's like this is the same species, but their environment shapes them so
Right.
differently that, and I wouldn't have even expected that. At least at my site, I tend to have like extremely large box-shaped bari, and they're feeding on invasive corbicula
Oh,
clams.
yeah.
Like that's a very big part of their diet. So they've got massively enlarged heads compared
Uh,
to, which is not common for that
no.
species. So like, yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. And we just got like a horrific snowstorm in Delaware. So I do wonder if a bunch of my turtles died in that, but like, I guess this summer we'll
Yeah,
see.
my guess is probably not, but maybe you will have a few mortalities, but I think we tend to forget how
Yeah.
resilient turtles are too. I mean, if you look at,
Yeah. Yeah.
down south, I mean, the alligators are surviving these frozen waters in Florida. So,
Yeah.
I think that we need to give them a little more credit. So don't be discouraged yet, but maybe you would see a few mortalities. It will be interesting. I'm curious to hear about it.
I'm
Yeah.
curious. I mean, you
That's a good
mentioned
point.
the field experience working with the Blannings, and just kind of that's been a theme throughout. But I'm curious if you've got any particularly interesting, harrowing, whatever stories from doing work in the field. Everyone's got something, so I'm curious what yours is.
Right. Yeah. I have quite a few, but I think if we're talking about harrowing, or maybe crazy, I would say when I was conducting my thesis during, my master's, I was in this area that was a state game area, and there was just a lot of people who decided to do drugs in the same area and park next to me and do drugs. And I don't know, I just kind of let them do their thing. I was like, you're not bothering me, I'm not bothering you. All right, as long as you're alive, it's fine. But I remember one time there's like a string of things that have happened with crazy people out there, but I was parked next to this lady. I'd always see her and her dog, and she'd be just doing her thing. I do mine. And there was one day I saw her passed out. She was like sweat and like hair stuck to her face. And I was like, oh crap, she overdosed. So I'm like going up to her car, her dog's barking, and I was like, are you okay? Hey, hey. She shoots up and her eyes are just so dilated and just stares at me like just seeing through me. I was like, oh my God, am I a ghost? And then she just turns on the car, gets in reverse, and then like forwards it to try to hit me. And so I had to jump into the forest. And I was like, what the hell? And so I had to jump and like tuck and roll. And then she just skirts out of there. And then ever since when I was parking there, she would see my car and immediately leave. I was like, I was just trying to make sure you're okay and you didn't overdose. But and then there was like a couple weeks later, I was out in the field, and I never had headphones with my or my receivers, which is not the best, but I just always put it next to my ear. And so I remember one time I just kept hearing this whizzing, and usually it's like soldier flies that just will follow me around. And I was just ignoring it because I was listening to my receiver. And then it just felt different. I just kept hearing bzz, bzz, and just feeling like this change.
Yeah.
So then I decided to turn off my receiver, and then I hear and then whiz. And I was like, oh my God, those are gunshots. And so then I was like, hey, someone's out here, someone's out here. But I was so enclosed by the forest, and I had like orange on, it was like bright, you could see me, but like they could not hear me. And so I think they were, I'm hoping this is what happened, but I think that they were target shooting, but it was just really close to me. And so I just kept hearing these bullets whiz by me, and I was like, crap. So I like got on my hands and knees. Also, one thing about me, I'm extremely allergic to poison sumac, and that's everywhere in the field. And so I'm like crawling my hands and knees, texting
Mm.
my advisor. I was like, I have only a couple more turtles. I think they'll stop soon. She's like, get out of there. What are you talking about?
I think they'll
And I
stop.
was like,
It's good to
I
see
know,
where
but I
your
was like, oh, it's
priorities
an
are.
hour
Right?
drive back. I do not want to waste my time. I think it's okay. And then I'm crawling back. She's like, you need to leave. And I was like, all right, fine. And I'm crawling back, and I stopped because I saw this snake, and I was like, oh, cool. It was a Massasauga rattlesnake. Just slithers right in front of me as I'm army crawling, getting poison sumac all over my body. And oh my gosh. And I was just like stopped and stared at this snake. And I was like, all right, this is like, which one do I want to do? I was like, I have to crawl around this guy, or I have to stand up and then get, risk, being shot. So that's fun. And then, yeah, so that was like really, really nervous to go back to my field stay after these 2 experiences. So I kept going and I
Yeah,
was
I
like, it's
would be
fine.
too.
Everything's
Damn.
fine. And so fall comes and in Michigan, morel hunting is like a huge thing. And I love morels. So I was like, oh, I know that this is like really good habitat in the forest to go look for morels. So after I'm done, I'll just kind of like take a walk back to my car and look for some morels. And I was doing that. And then in the tree line, there's a road and this truck kind of sputters to a stop. And I was like, oh, no worries, And this guy gets out and starts screaming at me. And he's like, I'm going to kill you. And I was just like, what? And this guy's like, I have this little tiny morel knife. I got my transmitter, my antenna in the back. And I was just like, what? And he's like, yeah, I'm going to kill you. This is my spot. And I couldn't understand what he's saying. I think he was drugged out too. His dog gets out and I could hear him, like I could kind of see him, but he starts running at me. So I was like, oh my God, oh my God. So I just start sprinting. And then I'm like sprinting really hard and I get clotheslined by my antenna. So I just fall my back and I'm just like,
Oh,
I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die here. And I just like hear him stop. The dog's just like barking and they jump back in the truck and they start just like going really slowly. I could like hear him. So I'm like crawling back. I feel like G.I. Jane. I'm just like just hiding between the bushes. I was like, I don't know what's happening. My phone doesn't have service in that area too. So I can't just like in this like one specific area, like I couldn't really call anyone. And it was like, I think I was just too scared to try. I think I was just like, I need to get back to my car immediately. And so I was like crawling back and I could see him just like checking the area. Unfortunately, there's a whole bunch of people that are parked there again doing drugs. So I think he was like looking for my car and my car was like not distinguishable at the time. Thank God. And so he like stopped at my car and I was like right at the forest line. I was just like peeking behind a bush watching him and he just like kind of stares around and he just like slowly gets out and I just ran to my car, jumped out and I just like zoomed out of there. I think it was like the scariest moment of my life. Like I was pretty like outside of being shot, like that was like for some reason really, really scary. So yeah, my thesis was pretty fun.
so all of the what the hell? Who would have thought
Mad
working with spotted
Right.
turtles was so
I know.
dangerous? All of that was at your site. Like
Yep.
you were, that's
And
insane.
I'm
I've never
not
that.
really
That's the being
yeah, go ahead.
the coming under fire like out of nowhere. Like that's like a fear that I think some of us have, but like should never
Right.
actually happen. Like
Mhm.
I didn't
Especially
expect that in
insane.
Ohio, not
Wow.
Michigan.
And especially where you were like, I've still got to get a couple
I
more
know.
turtles.
I
Like,
was like, oh,
yeah,
that's when I know
you're like,
you're crazy.
yeah, like that's your that's yeah, that's the that was
Yeah, and
great.
it's funny because like I've never really had too many more experiences like that, like ever. I just got yelled at by some guy and then, it was squashed out. But yeah, those were just the most wild experiences I think I've ever had. And I think Michigan's a lot more redneck than people think, especially in the area I was working in. It's pretty redneck. And I think I've lived in so many redneck areas that I was just like, I'm used to this, not a big deal. And then when I tell people, they think I'm either lying or they're like, you're just crazy. And I'm like, yeah, I am crazy. So, but I'm not lying. This happened, I swear.
I feel that series of stories is up there with the best. I mean, that's crazy. That's every
That
possible
is
issue you
insane.
could have.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh man, I know. Yeah, I know. I talked to some of
Incredible.
my friends, and I've had friends who have gotten chased by lions and gotten captured by poachers. So sometimes I'm like, oh, my story's not that bad, and then I'll talk to other people. They're like, yeah, I got a whole bunch of bees, and they stung me, and I was like, oh, I got shot at, and not like trying to like go tat for tat, tit for tat, but it's just like sometimes you have to be, realize like, oh, maybe that wasn't okay.
No, you shouldn't have been coming under fire.
That's crazy.
insane.
That is interesting. What's the craziest story you've heard on the Field Stories podcast? I mean, what
Oh,
you guys get some
one of my
interesting.
favorite ones, this guy named Luke, and he actually lives in Gainesville. He's doing his PhD on birds in China. And I think Luke's originally from China. I forget his last name. But I remember he told us a story about he was going back home to do some research, and it was like during COVID time. But where he was doing his research was like really remote. So, he was like, I'm not gonna run into anyone. This is fine. He has his mask, he has his permits, it's all good. So he's going out, he is like by himself binoculars on looking for these birds, and then suddenly he just gets approached by this huge van of people, and I think it's from the army, and they're like interrogating him, like, "What are you doing here?" And they have machetes out, they have like, all these weapons, and they're like getting really in his face. And Luke's from there too, so he's like trying to explain. He's like, "Hey, I'm a researcher." He's like, "Where are your papers? These aren't real." And so they're like interrogating him for an hour. So they decide to call like some of the local villagers to come. And so these like old men start coming and they all circle him. Some of them are drinking, some of them are smoking. They're all like, "You need to respect your elders and you can't be out during this COVID time," and all this stuff. And so he's like, it got to a point he's like, "I gotta let them, just hash it out." And honestly, sometimes like that's the best thing to do. And so he's letting these guys hash him out. And he's like, and then they go, "You need to come back to our village tonight." And so he's like, nervous. He doesn't know who these people are. He's by himself. He's like, "They're not going to let me research. Like, you have the army here, you have like these villagers here." He's like, "All right." Goes back and he's like, "I'm not a big drinker," but he like to, accommodate and be respectful of their elders. They're like, drink this, smoke this." And so he's getting drunk with these villagers just to save face. They start like this huge it's called WeChat, I think, in China. And my brother lives there actually too. And so they started this big WeChat group of him and the villagers, and they're like, "You're the best. You can come back anytime." And so they like started this big group chat with him, with Luke and all these like villagers, just because they're like, "Oh, we love you now. Like you drank, you smoked with us," or I don't know if you smoked, but and yeah, and all from just like trying to look for birds. And so I think that's like one of my favorite ones, honestly. And I feel bad. I feel like I didn't retell it as well as he did, but that's a great episode. He's fantastic.
Well, people got to go listen to the Field Stories
Yeah.
podcast. We'll link it, and yeah, you can hear stories. I mean, that's a great teaser.
Right.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, totally.
Well, I think we'll start to wrap things up, but we'd like to just close it out with a few questions. We've touched on this a little bit with some of the work that you're doing now, but what are your future goals and plans in the next 5, 10 years, or just long term?
I feel like I'm the worst person to ask. I've never been a person that is a planner. To be honest, I just kind of go with the next best thing. And I think it's just because I love, like I've told you before, I started in fisheries. I worked on NOAA boats. I lived in Australia because I decided I wanted, study these marine snails. And then I went to Portugal and I wanted to study, what's happening with ghost net, fishing and the salmon turtles. And so I don't know. I think the next goal is either PhD and probably back into more freshwater ecology, but tied in with herpetofauna as well, so I can have both of those skills sets for the future. And then, I'd love to eventually be a state herpetologist, kind of like my boss. But also, I'd love to. I don't know. I want to make sure I incorporate outreach, but I always know that I want to continue my research and I want to be a researcher that also is well integrated in the public within this local, area so that people, because I feel that, that's the biggest thing I've noticed is like, I want to make a change. I can make a change, conducting research, sure, but it's also, I want to be so a part of a community where people know, what we're doing, they care, they're passionate. And so I know that that is a part of my goal. And whether that is, I'm going to be continuing to learn whether I do a PhD or not. With this position, I hope that I will continue with it for as long as I can. But, if there's another opportunity, then, that I'm like, "Oh, this excites me. I'm going to take it." And I guess that's just me. I know some people have like these really set out goals, but for me, I don't know. I think that's the beauty of life is like I'm excited because it's so unexpected and I'm just really ready to learn and for the next journey. But also because of, where our world is, I want to make sure that I'm educating and building a community that really cares for these animals.
That's awesome. Yeah. That was I mean, it's cool that that, this is something that you got interested in, and now it's just like you've gone through the steps and continue to research, but also making a difference. Like, just at this thing that I did last night, just gave a little poster about like ways to protect turtles in the southeast, and we did some diversity metrics and like compared the state of Alabama to all countries for turtles, and it was really fascinating to me how many people just even that simple concept, they hadn't thought about how important this area is, but then how many of them, and this could be a function of being in grad school and still in school, it's more like narrow-minded thinking, but how many had not really thought of ways to protect the animals that a lot of us study. So it's really cool that that's something that's part of your goal, that's something that's there.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that also congratulations on presenting a poster. I think that any type of outreach and education is so important. No matter how old you are, and obviously you are very accomplished, both of you at such a young age. So it's really cool to see and watch you guys. From vicariously through social media, but also like hear through my own colleagues too. So I have a lot of friends and people have spoke very highly of you, and I think that it's really good that you're continuing to be a really good role model for people your age and educating. And I think the biggest thing is when we are in such a divided world right now is just taking the time to talk to people and realize that yeah, you're right. Like I tend to forget that people don't think about climate change every single day, or they're not driving down the road going, oh, that wetland, it needs a good burn, or, and so I forget that sometimes. And I think it's really good to sit down and take the time to educate and give that space for people who maybe are, maybe they're afraid of just thinking that you think that they're dumb, or they're afraid of, saying the wrong thing, but like providing that space and, poster exhibitions, or just outreach and educational talks to give people that space to think about it so they can bring it home. And I think that is so important. So that's awesome.
That's awesome. Well, I guess our last question, we'd like to just, as students,
Yeah.
we want to know, what is one piece of advice or just advice you would give to someone looking to make turtle work a career?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say that continue to build your connections, and take as many opportunities as you can, because it's really, I hate saying this, but a lot of it's about who you know. Like it's going to those conferences and having those presentations and being seen by the right person, or having a connection with someone like working with Jordan Giannini. He was a big reason also why I got that job, because he was a great reference, because he's also seen my work. I've collaborated with him. If I didn't have that, who knows if I've gotten this job. I went to the presentation and my boss didn't see me. He had no idea who I was. So, I think it's just so important to make really good quality connections, get your name out there, and just participate as much as you can. But also don't stretch yourself too thin. So it's just having that good balance. And I think another thing too, if you want to get in the turtle world, is having a diversity of experience. I think that, having, a narrowed experience in turtles is awesome. And that's great under your belt, but also you want to look at the big picture. For instance, like with my job right now, I'm doing a lot of like habitat management. And so I can't just think about turtles nesting, but I also have to think about where are the birds, and, what kind of trees are, important here, and what, like for instance, like not a lot of people know that white pines will just pop up like weeds. So, we need to clear cut those. And, there's a lot of different things. So broaden your experience, broaden your knowledge so that you can look at things as a whole, because I think ecologically that is the best way to manage a lot of these ecosystems and these species.
That's awesome. Yeah, yeah, like more take an integrative approach and like you have said, develop those skills in the spatial modeling or else
Mhm.
and bring that to the turtles, right?
Right.
That's
I think you make a great point about, at least in the turtle world, like having those connections and knowing the right people is massive. And like you have like anybody can just go to TSA or something if they like if you just pay the fee, like you like that's one thing, like way back in the day, like when I was younger, uh I read all of Peter Pritchard's books, and I read about the Colonian Research Institute, and I'm like, you can just go visit this place and you can just go meet this guy. Like that's like if you can just go and do that, even when you're like at the lowest level, you've got no experience or anything, you're just a kid that's interested in it, like that, building those connections from that point just has been like incredibly helpful. And it's been amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's doing things like podcasts like this and having, these important conversations and, you're making connections every time you have someone on here, right? And I think that's really
Yeah,
cool too. Like I think
definitely.
about my own podcast and all the people I've met and I've now actually become really good friends with, that I talk on a daily. And I know that if they had an opportunity for me, they would just call me up right away. Same with them. And so it's about like helping each other out because unfortunately it's an oversaturated field. So you do what you can. And it's, when you have more connections and you establish a really good rapport, then, then you're set.
That's awesome. I think I mean, a good place we can transition into the last part of things. Jack can maybe preface you here. I think that
I guess at the end, normally you do it, Michael, or forget to include it in the,
yeah, but you
what's it called? Like
yeah.
questions. But yeah, like we usually do like a rounds of turtle trivia
Okay.
at the end. I guess the goal is to stump each other. So whatever, if you want to ask a question, see if we can get, and then we'll maybe fire a few back and forth.
Okay. I feel like I'm not going to do as well as you guys. But all right.
I don't have anything prepared off the top of my
I
head.
have
So
like a
like,
couple. So one of them is what is the grandfather turtle? What is the scientific name? And yeah.
the grandfather
Mhm.
turtle, that's the Yangtze giant softshell, right?
Mhm.
Rapidus. I'm thinking of a specific individual
I'm
turtle.
thinking of
Am I?
a prehistoric turtle.
Oh,
I was thinking of, Michael, you know what I was thinking of? I was thinking of the
yeah.
Honkiem turtle
No,
from
that
Vietnam
was
because he was
quick
called
though. Sorry.
I was thinking of him because he was called the
Oh,
grandfather
okay.
turtle, but he died in like 2016. Yeah, so no, what I
I
technically was wrong then. So I
Um,
was
the
do you want to
Preganicelles.
try guessing or do you want me to tell you?
Is it Preganicelles? Is that
no, no, no,
Was
no.
it
Yeah, let
Preganicelles?
Michael's got one.
Kelly's? Sorry, I can't hear you.
Well, so okay, what you're talking about, like the first turtle, right? In evolutionary history, is that?
Um,
I,
yeah, I mean it's dubbed. I don't know if it's exactly the first turtle because it's the first like one of the first shell-less turtles or carapace-less turtles.
okay. Oh, okay. I'll give you a few names and we'll
Okay,
just see if this is right.
okay,
So, Papa Kelly's is
that
one.
one. Yep,
Okay, yeah.
yep. Nice.
Cool.
Wow, look at you. Yeah.
Thanks.
Um, it went extinct, I think 140 million years before the T-Rex was even, on Earth. So, which is pretty cool. But yeah, it's one of the first carapace-less turtles with a really widened rib cage, but still kind of had a plastron. But it was really tiny.
That's a good one. We had Tyler Leeson, and I think he was involved in the discovery of that. That's why because I remember reading that paper, but that's a really a good question. No one's gone there. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
was
that was
like,
good.
okay, what can I stump them with? And I was like, let's go old. Let's go real old.
Yeah.
I think Craig Stanford and Peter Lindemann have had maybe the craziest. It took like a minute or a minute and a half to explain the question, and those were like it was no way.
Well, we asked him to stump us, and that's what they
Yeah,
didn't come back.
I think
But
I have another one.
yeah.
But I don't know if you guys want to ask a couple too.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. We need some time to think. So
yeah,
okay.
I need
There
time to prepare.
is a island that was dubbed by the Native Americans, and there's a cultural story about this island starting out as a turtle, and then it like this turtle sacrificed his life for all of his friends when there was a great flood, and of all his animal friends, and then he turned into an island. Do you know what island that's called? And it's in the Midwest.
I got nothing.
I only know like maybe a single island.
This all sounds vaguely familiar though. I feel like I've heard this at some point,
Jack,
but I
you
don't
got it.
remember.
You got it.
No, what the hell? Something. No, I can't. It's gonna be. I'm gonna kick myself in the ass when I
This
learn
is
what it
probably
is. I
way
don't.
off. I know Saginaw's a place. Is that I don't know if that's an island. Is
No,
it
it's not an island.
a place in Michigan?
It's a place that you probably don't want to live.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Oh,
Do you guys
Yeah,
want me to tell you?
yeah. Go ahead. I
Okay,
mean,
it's Mackinac
is
Island.
it Michigan?
Yeah,
Oh no,
Mackinac.
I said Michigan as a whole.
it's Mackinac, right? Mackinac
Mackinac.
or it's okay. Is it spelled like Mackinac?
Yeah,
Though?
it's spelled like Mackinac. It's just there's a lot of like cities in Michigan, like Ypsilanti that looks like Ypsilanti, and Mackinac is Mackinac. So, but yeah, it's Mackinac Island. I used to work a lot with on a reservation when I was in undergrad, and I worked with some tribal members, and I got to learn about the cultural significance of Mackinac Island. And the story is it started, a turtle gave away his life and created the island. So it's pretty cool.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
One of my best friends from like when I was like 2 years old moved to Michigan, and there's a camp that he would go to, and it's on that island. I wouldn't have pulled that, but that's what I was thinking. Like, what? That's really interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, all right,
I think I
Jack,
have
go.
one. This might be too like obscure, but what percentage of tortoises, specifically tortoises, like Testudinidae, what percentage of tortoise species that have coexisted with humanity during the Pleistocene have went extinct?
Have what?
Went extinct.
Oh, went extinct.
Yeah.
I don't know this one.
You got me with the last one. That's
Yeah,
why
I know,
figured
this is
I'd
cruel.
I'll pull something.
Makes me like, don't.
No, I'm like, I'll
no,
pull
no,
something.
you're good. I don't know this one, to be honest. I'm gonna go with 80%.
No, it's on the higher end.
Okay.
It's 60.
Yeah.
60. Yeah. That was actually from the 2015 paper. That was, what was it? I don't know if Anders Rodin was the lead author. It was like big time. Like you had the big time turtle authors. It was going through all of the human or like human induced Chelonian extinctions, and tortoises by far suffered the most. Well, no, myelinads suffered the most because all of them are dead. But well, another topic. But 60% of tortoises that have coexisted with humanity, this goes back, to the Middle Pleistocene, were hunted to extinction, or we were a significant part of their extinction. And most of them were very large in body size, and they were mainland tortoises. That's like kind of created this misconstrued idea that, okay, the giant tortoises we have today, it's a result of insular gigantism, when largely it's not. It's just that large tortoises were historically some of the most vulnerable possible animals for humans. Like there were massive tortoises. The biggest tortoises that ever existed were mainland animals. The United States had tortoises that were larger than Galapagos tortoises, but they were like an armored tank that had no natural predators. But then humans come along and it's the perfect food source, and they're defenseless and they can't hide. So
sad.
That was it for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's horrible. I've got fossils of them right up over here. They're
Wow.
It's sad, but it's fascinating to find, and the sheer size of them too. They were.
Where did you
incredible.
find them? Like, you don't have to tell me where, but like, what were you
I found them
to find them? I guess.
Like, yeah, it's there's some interesting stories with that. Let me get this one piece. It was.
Do some show and tell.
I love it.
See this? Tell me, you want to know what part of the tortoise this is? That's the gular scoot right here.
Oh, really?
This is half of the gular scoot. So that gives you an idea. The head would rest like right here.
Yeah.
This came from a gigantic male, but like basically out of like the Santa Fe River, its tributaries, Swanee River, like all of those places down here are full of fossils. So I'm always out there looking for turtle fossils. Yes, it's part of the reason why I came down here is so much.
I know that's one thing I'm going to see if I can go down for Patrick's thesis, so I can go and help out with some alligator snapping turtle work, because that is one thing I have not worked with yet, and I'm itching to.
Yeah. They are my favorite American turtle. They are just incredible.
They're really cool.
Got plenty of experience with them here, and we're good. Like we're starting to work with them more in the Florida Panhandle now too, at least because that's an area that's like going back in
Right,
time. People are still eating them, and
right,
it's
right.
yeah, it's
Um,
pretty rough.
I have a question for you guys. Well, now I think feel like Jack has asked or answered it, but what is your favorite turtle species?
That's a good question.
Ooh, that's a good
I
one.
can I'll go I can go first while he's over there. Yeah.
Yeah, you go. I already
Mine
have my
just
answer.
changes, depending on what I'm doing at the
Yep.
moment. Honestly, I've just been thinking a lot about southeastern turtles in general, so I'd say they're all that's my primary focus right now. All southeastern turtles.
Mhm.
It's clear cut
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah,
For yeah, it's clear cut for the top two. Everything else is very difficult to categorize. But for my favorites, like the Galapagos tortoises, those nothing beats them for me.
Mhm.
They're just like that was like one of the first that I had read about in great detail, and
Mhm.
it's just I want to work with them someday. There's just incredible. Like I could go on forever
Yeah.
about them. And then and I kind of lump Aldabra tortoises into that giant tortoise group as well. So if, technically, after them, it's the alligator snapping turtles. They're just obviously they're just incredible.
Yeah.
There's so much unique. They have also all of everything that's so interesting about a turtle. You've got packed in this unique creature. But after them, it just changes all the time. It's like those are the ones that are like that stand
Right.
above the rest for me. But after them, it's like time of the day could be something. I could give you a
Okay.
different answer. Like,
Yeah, I feel that.
yeah. What was yours? I don't think you. I mean, is it a
Um,
spotted turtle or
you
like what?
know, so I kept saying it was spotted turtle mainly because I worked with them so much, but I feel like I'm
Right.
betraying like my children. But the wood turtle is really starting to kind of come close to my heart. I had a really unique experience with
That's
one
fair.
that
Yeah.
like came back to come, and check me out and like watch me the entire time.
I
I
saw that video.
It was
That was
insane. I've
insane.
never experienced that with a turtle, and I don't know, I just built this crazy connection. So I think my top 2 are it's wood turtle and spotted, and then the rest, like, are all changing. Although I do love northern river terrapins, and I really want to see one. I know I probably never will, but, like, oh, those are amazing. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah,
I'm
that's awesome.
curious how I mean, I'm just thinking like this spatial ecology stuff, that could be applied because with the snapping turtles, I worked on a project in the summer in Texas where they were tracking them, and I don't think that they really think, they have the MCT and just the basic ideas, but it'd be like that seems like something you could maybe apply to a bunch of different places and use that almost as like a way to get involved and go see things. I don't know if that's
Oh, are you talking about, like, helping people out with their stats and using
yeah,
it
I
as
guess, yeah, just like
um,
yeah, I don't know if that's something, but
I
just like
mean,
it's like a tool, right?
yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Using it as a way to get access to
Yeah,
stuff
right,
you
right.
want. Yeah,
yeah, I mean, absolutely.
that's what he's saying. Just more.
I think a big reason why a lot of people don't use it is because it is a difficult code. There is a lot of intricacies to it, and understanding like what a variogram is and how to use an AIC, and there are a lot of errors. So I think that especially like our older generation who didn't grow up with R and these really advanced stats. And not saying anything as them, as statisticians, but just it's a huge learning curve, and you have to dedicate a lot of time to it. So I'd love to advertise that and be like, "Hey, I can help with your spatials if you let me, hold this alligator snapping turtle and help out." So definitely, that's something I probably will use in the future, but I don't usually advertise myself like, "Hey, you want some spatial ecology help?" So
Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, it's just it's like you said, good to be varied and just have the
mhm.
skill sets when the opportunity comes up, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Thanks.
Well, that's I mean, I think that's, good if I mean,
Yeah,
if
that wraps up
Yeah.
pretty
yeah, if
well.
you have anything that you wanna close out with, feel free, and
Well, I just thank you guys so much for having me on. I really enjoyed talking to you, and it's always so great to have a conversation about turtles and share stories. And I feel that we had such good dialogue, and your questions were really great. And I hope that this helps, future, turtle biologists that want to be in this field or herpetologists. So yeah, what you guys are doing is awesome. Thanks for having me on.
thank you. That was awesome.
Yep. Thank you.
Alright, we'll see you guys on the next one.